The dark truth about inbreeding in human history. Were early humans actually inbred? The shocking genetics of ancient human families. How inbreeding shaped early human evolution. Did our ancestors really reproduce with relatives? The taboo secret hidden in ancient DNA. How common was inbreeding among early humans? Ancient human DNA reveals a disturbing truth. What prehistoric genes tell us about inbreeding. The twisted reality of ancient human reproduction. Neanderthal remains discovered in a Siberian cave revealed a father and his adolescent daughter, alongside several other biological relatives. Their genomes showed remarkably low genetic diversity. This was clearly a tiny population. In fact, scientists estimate this specific community contained only about 20 individuals. If any ancient group appeared destined for unavoidable inbreeding, this one certainly fit the description. However, the DNA contained another crucial detail. The diversity in mitochondrial DNA, passed down strictly through mothers, was far higher than the diversity in Y chromosomes passed down through fathers. The most logical explanation is that women frequently moved between different Neanderthal groups. Meanwhile, men were much more likely to stay in the community where they were born. Even Neanderthals, living at the extreme edge of their known geographic range, were connected to the outside world. Their immediate group was small. Their actual mating pool was much larger. Now, this does not mean Neanderthals never mated with relatives. Their genomes feature many short stretches of identical DNA. That pattern points to long-term, small population sizes and general background relatedness. Some individuals clearly descended from communities that had been isolated for generations. Yet there is a massive biological difference between a population being distantly related and a person reproducing with their own sibling. A group can show low overall genetic diversity for several reasons. Its members might descend from a small founding group, survive a severe population bottleneck, or continuously mate within a restricted regional network. These scenarios produce many short runs of homozygosity. Those are specific stretches where both inherited copies of a chromosome are identical. In contrast, a union between recent close relatives creates fewer but much longer identical stretches. Think of it like comparing two copies of a massive book. Distant relatives share scattered matching sentences inherited from ancestors who lived long ago. But a child of siblings inherits entire matching chapters. That happens because both parents received massive, overlapping sections of DNA from the exact same mother and father. Geneticists call these identical segments runs of homozygosity. They are the exact signature dead ancestors leave behind, revealing family connections that were never written down. The biological danger of these unions comes down to recessive mutations. Virtually every human carries potentially harmful genetic variants. Normally, a healthy gene copy inherited from the other parent prevents a recessive mutation from causing harm. Unrelated parents are very unlikely to carry the exact same rare, harmful variant. Close relatives, on the other hand, share a huge portion of their ancestral DNA. If two siblings have a child, that child faces a much higher risk of receiving the same harmful variant from both sides. That overlap significantly increases the risk of birth defects, reduced fertility, developmental issues, weakened immune systems, stillbirths, and infant mortality. Biologists call this outcome inbreeding depression. The phenomenon is very real. It is also frequently misunderstood. A child born to close relatives does not automatically look like a creature out of a medieval painting. In reality, many of these children are born looking completely healthy. The danger is a statistical probability, not an absolute guarantee. A single union between close relatives might produce healthy children with no obvious health problems. The real disaster happens when close inbreeding repeats across multiple generations. That cycle constantly brings harmful recessive variants together, making the health consequences almost impossible to avoid. Evolution does not penalize family reproduction because of moral taboos. It simply exposes hidden genetic vulnerabilities. Ancient humans could easily observe these real-world consequences long long before anyone knew what a chromosome was. If unions between close relatives consistently resulted in fewer surviving children, early communities would naturally link those relationships with danger. Yet practical observation was likely only part of the puzzle. Humans also appear to have built-in psychological mechanisms that reduce attraction toward people they grew up with. This is widely known as the Westermarck effect. The core idea is straightforward. Close daily contact during early childhood dampens sexual attraction later in life. The human brain does not calculate actual genetic percentages. Instead, it relies on childhood familiarity as a rough estimate for family. Biological siblings raised in separate households might not develop that natural aversion. Conversely, unrelated children raised closely together often treat each other like biological siblings. Human kin recognition also relies on other social cues. People pay attention to who their mother cares for as a newborn, family stories, physical resemblance, names, and social roles. Even so, growing up in the same home gives the mind a remarkably effective shortcut. The person fighting you for breakfast every morning throughout your childhood just does not register as a romantic partner. Numerous studies across various cultural settings back up this effect. People raised together from early childhood consistently show reduced attraction and stronger resistance towards sexual relationships between close family members. Historical examples involving communal child-rearing and arranged child marriages also show that intense early familiarity suppresses later sexual interest. Nature did not install a flawless incest detector in the human brain. It simply installed an extremely aggressive sibling vibe. Culture then took that biological foundation and made it much stronger. Human societies are obsessed with classifying family members. Languages build complex vocabularies to distinguish a mother from an aunt, an older brother from a younger brother, or a biological parent from a social parent. Some ancient kinship systems make a modern family tree look like a simple children's menu. These categories exist to regulate societal responsibility. They determine who shares food, who inherits land, who protects children, who performs sacred rituals, and who is allowed to become a romantic partner. Under these rules, a person could be genetically distant yet classified socially as a forbidden sibling. Conversely, another person might be a genetic cousin while belonging to a socially preferred marriage category. If you want to dive even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. It features 10 detailed modules with over 3 hours of content covering everything we rarely talk about on YouTube, including ancient fears, early communication, and prehistoric predators. It also comes with an exclusive PDF guide, and you can find the link down in the description below. This complex social web is precisely why the question of ancient family reproduction cannot be answered by biology alone. Family has always been both a genetic reality and a social construct. The history of cousin marriage illustrates this overlap clearly. To many modern viewers, the word cousin immediately implies a close relative, but significant degrees exist. First cousins share grandparents. Second cousins share great-grandparents. Beyond that level, the actual biological relationship drops off very rapidly. In a small regional population, almost every potential partner becomes a distant cousin if you trace the genealogy far enough back. At a certain point, reproducing with relatives simply means reproducing with people from your local area. Ancient humans did not need partners with zero shared ancestry. Achieving that would have eventually required leaving the human species entirely. They simply needed to avoid excessively close genetic matches. Some societies strictly prohibited all recognized cousins. Others actively encouraged marriage between specific types of cousins to reinforce political alliances, keep land within a family line, or maintain trust between clans. Cross cousins, the children of a parent's opposite-sex sibling, were preferred partners in several kinship systems. Meanwhile, parallel cousins were often classified as siblings and strictly forbidden. To an outsider, both relationships look like standard first cousins. Socially, however, they belong to completely opposite categories. These rules help circulate partners systematically between neighboring groups. If one family lineage regularly exchanged spouses with another, marriage became much more than individual romance. It functioned as social infrastructure. That exchange carried genes, but it also built long-term trust. Your partner's relatives became people you could trade with, visit safely, or call upon during a territory dispute. Children created a physical bridge between two groups that might otherwise fight over resources. In a dangerous environment, an extended family network was basic survival insurance that happened to involve a wedding. That dynamic is likely a major reason why extreme incest remained rare, even in small early communities. Inbreeding avoidance was socially useful long before anyone understood the mechanics of genetics. Then came the rise of permanent settlements. People often assume agriculture solved the mating problem by putting far more people in the same place. In many ways, it did. Larger populations provided a much deeper pool of potential partners. Early villages could easily welcome newcomers, trade with neighbors, and maintain broad regional networks. However, settled life also created brand new motives to control marriage tightly. Land, livestock, stored grain, houses, and inherited social status could now be kept inside specific family lines. Lineages suddenly became politically and economically vital. Some communities began practicing endogamy, strictly choosing partners from inside a designated local group. Others became heavily patrilineal, with women regularly moving into male-centered households. Ancient genomes recovered from Neolithic and Bronze Age cemeteries frequently reveal local clusters of related men living alongside women from diverse external backgrounds. At the Gurji archaeological site in France, researchers successfully reconstructed massive family trees spanning up to 7 generations. The data revealed a strictly patrilineal community, where the men remained in their ancestral home, while the women almost exclusively moved in from outside groups. This arrangement kept sons near their fathers, while bringing in partners from the outside. It allowed communities to concentrate property and land without completely concentrating the gene pool. Other ancient communities organized themselves very differently. The earliest farming settlements were not running one universal marriage operating system. Some households contained very few close biological relatives, proving that living under one roof did not always mean belonging to a nuclear family. Adoption, fostering, remarriage, close friendships, servitude, and ritual bonds shaped household structures alongside biological ancestry. A house was not automatically a genetic box. A grave was not automatically a family photo. Ancient DNA has made that distinction painfully obvious to modern archaeologists. People buried together in the same tomb may not have been close relatives at all. Conversely, close family members were often buried miles apart. A prestigious tomb might represent a political lineage, a social office, a ritual membership, or a shared identity, rather than a group of people who ate dinner together every night. Then there are the shocking exceptions. One of the most remarkable cases comes from Newgrange in Ireland. Newgrange is a massive passage tomb constructed over 5,000 years ago. Building it required coordinated physical labor on an unprecedented scale. Deep inside the most prestigious section of the monument, researchers recovered the remains of an adult man. His genome contained extraordinary amounts of long, identical DNA stretches. His parents were undeniably first-degree relatives. The biologically possible relationships include full brother and sister or parent and child. Genetics alone cannot reliably distinguish between those two scenarios because both produce identical levels of shared ancestry. The physical location makes the discovery even more compelling. This was not an outcast discarded on the margins of a settlement. He was laid to rest in inside a monument associated with immense ritual and political authority. Researchers suggested that his parentage might reflect a socially sanctioned union within an elite ruling class. It points to a dynasty attempting to maintain sacred status or power through extreme endogamy. That interpretation is certainly plausible. However, it remains unproven. The genome proves his parents were exceptionally close biological relatives. The monument proves he received extraordinary burial treatment. What the DNA cannot tell us is whether that union was consensual, coerced, secret, sacred, or simply a violation of the rules that happened to produce a child. Prehistory preserved the genetic evidence. It erased the human testimony. An even more specific case emerged from Bronze Age southern Italy. At the Grotta della Monaca site, researchers analyzed a young male with nearly 800 centimorgans of long homozygous DNA segments. That extreme result points directly to first-degree parental relatedness. Researchers were also able to identify the boy's father among the individuals buried in the same cave. Genetic markers prove that the father was not connected to the mother through her maternal line. Reconstructing the pedigree led to a grim conclusion. The boy's father was also the mother's biological father. The child was born from a father-daughter union. Once again, DNA records the biological event, not the human circumstances behind it. It cannot reveal whether this was systemic abuse, a socially permitted elite practice, a dynastic arrangement, or an isolated tragedy. Given the massive power imbalance inherent in a father-daughter relationship, inventing a romantic explanation would be deeply irresponsible. The boy's genome documents a birth. It does not document consent. Similar extreme cases have surfaced in Neolithic and Chalcolithic remains from Israel and Malta. Yet these instances remain extraordinarily rare compared to the thousands of ancient individuals now fully sequenced. That rarity is the most important part of the story. An unusual, shocking burial attracts immense attention and can easily distort our entire view of the past. An ancient royal born from incest makes headlines. The fact that most ordinary humans found partners who were not immediate relatives lacks archaeological drama. Yet that boring normality is the real scientific discovery. Broad ancient DNA surveys found only a single first-degree incest case out of nearly 1,800 analyzed individuals. Around 3% showed DNA patterns consistent with closer parental relatedness, typically around the level of first cousins. Even that 3% figure is a high estimate for actual cousin marriages. Small, isolated populations can generate those exact same genetic patterns, even if the parents were not direct first cousins. Ancient DNA preserves unevenly across the globe. Cold environments and specific bones preserve genetic material much better than hot climates. Europe and parts of Eurasia are heavily represented in current research, while tropical regions remain undersampled. Burial customs also dictate whose remains survive long enough for modern science to find. Elites often received sturdy, well-preserved tombs. Meanwhile, cultures that practiced cremation destroyed their genetic record entirely. Infants who died without receiving a formal burial may disappear from the archaeological record entirely. There is another uncomfortable possibility to consider. Children born from extreme inbreeding might have died in early infancy, before receiving the types of burials that modern researchers sample. Some ancient societies may have intentionally killed infants produced by strictly forbidden unions. Others may have quietly concealed the event altogether. Ancient DNA can only analyze the remains that archaeology successfully recovers. A ratio of 1 in nearly 1,800 does not mean exactly one first-degree union occurred for every 1,800 births. It simply means such unions were remarkably rare among the sampled individuals who left behind usable genomes. Still, the overarching pattern is overwhelming. Ancient populations were not casually ignoring close family ties. Even communities with high background relatedness routinely avoided mating with immediate relatives. Why then did certain ruling elites do the exact opposite? The answer is simple. Power changes the rules. In ancient Egypt, royal sibling marriage became famous because specific dynasties used it to maintain divine identity and political legitimacy. Gods married their own siblings in Egyptian mythology. By following suit, a king and queen could present themselves as sacred counterparts, while keeping royal authority strictly inside the family. The Ptolemies later embraced sibling marriage with enough enthusiasm to make their family tree look like a recycling symbol. Cleopatra VII's own ancestry was the result of repeated, intense, close kin unions. Although the dynasty was Macedonian Greek in origin, they adopted and intensified local traditions that reinforced absolute royal exclusivity. Other ruling systems, including specific elites in ancient Hawaii and the Inca Empire, also permitted exceptionally close unions to protect sacred rank. These practices were memorable precisely because ordinary rules did not apply to rulers. If regular people routinely married their siblings, royal incest would no longer demonstrate divine difference. Its political value came directly from crossing a boundary that structured everyday life for everyone else. The ruler was considered so sacred that even the ultimate taboo could be transformed into an exclusive privilege. Or, more realistically, absolute power allowed rulers to force everyone else to accept it as sacred. Elite families also held distinct material advantages. They could easily support children with severe health issues, secure multiple partners if fertility dropped, command wet nurses, and hide the physical consequences behind palace walls. A struggling hunter-gatherer family could not transform reduced fertility into a ceremonial success. Yet, dynastic inbreeding carried undeniable biological costs. Repeated close unions dramatically increased the odds that harmful genetic variants would meet. As a result, several royal lineages suffered severe health and fertility crises over time. However, attributing a specific ancient ruler's physical appearance or chronic illness directly to incest requires extreme caution. Royal portraits were heavily stylized. Mummies are often incomplete. Medical diagnoses attempted across thousands of years have a habit of becoming surprisingly confident right where the actual evidence is weakest. Genetics explains an increased statistical risk. It does not turn every unusual jawline in ancient art into a solved medical case. For ordinary ancient humans, preventing close family reproduction was not a single, highly organized strategy. Instead, several natural defenses overlapped seamlessly. Children naturally developed an aversion toward those they grew up beside. Adults actively taught complex family categories. Communities strictly prohibited specific relationships. Members of one or both sexes regularly moved between neighboring groups. Seasonal gatherings introduced new potential partners from outside areas. Marriage was used to build vital alliances across different camps and villages. Language tracked ancestry far beyond what physical appearance could reveal, and local gossip handled whatever quality control remained. A person considering a partner did not need to remember 7 generations of family history on their own. Parents, grandparents, and village elders carried that collective social memory. They knew who came from where, whose child someone was, and which union would spark a feud. Oral societies were not societies without records. Their records were alive, active, and frequently judgmental. Paternity could be misidentified. Family members could be separated in childhood and reunited as adults. Violence and coercion could override social rules. Severe population crashes could leave people with very few potential partners. Islands, remote mountain valleys, natural disasters, warfare, or epidemics could shrink a mating network almost overnight. In those extreme conditions, people faced a harsh choice: reproduce with a relative or do not reproduce at all. Some chose the relative. That decision was not necessarily irrational. The genetic risk of a single cousin union is far smaller than the demographic risk of an entire community producing 0 children. A tiny population cannot preserve theoretical genetic purity while going extinct with excellent principles. Human groups always had to balance the immediate survival of the population against long-term genetic risks. Too little connection beyond the local community increased the danger of inbreeding. Too much permanent separation, on the other hand, weakened cooperation inside it. Our species solved both problems by building nested social circles. Human life was organized into household, camp, lineage, neighboring band, seasonal gathering, trading network, and wider cultural population. People lived with a manageable number of daily companions while maintaining access to partners and allies elsewhere. That unique social architecture may have been one of humanity's greatest survival advantages. Neanderthals also moved between communities, but their overall populations remained small and fragmented over long periods. Modern humans arriving in Eurasia may have maintained broader or much denser social networks, though the evidence remains debated across different regions and eras. Wider connections preserved genetic diversity, spread technological innovations, and provided emergency support when a local group faced famine. A partner from a distant group was therefore not merely a romantic choice. They were essential population maintenance. They carried unfamiliar immune system variants, new relatives, different skills, and proof that the human world extended far beyond the next ridge. This reality makes the original question sound almost backward. Ancient humans did not routinely reproduce with close relatives simply because they lived in small groups. Instead, they repeatedly reorganized those groups precisely so they would not have to. The camp expanded its horizon through marriage. The village actively recruited outsiders. Young adults moved to new settlements. Families systematically exchanged partners. Seasonal gatherings renewed regional relationships. And cultural taboos turned a biological danger into a strict social prohibition long before anyone knew what a recessive allele was. When those social mechanisms failed, or when absolute rulers deliberately broke them, DNA preserved the permanent result. A man buried beneath Newgrange carries massive matching genetic segments inherited from first-degree relatives. A boy in an Italian cave reveals that his father was also his maternal grandfather. Neanderthals in Siberia reveal deep isolation, alongside evidence of women arriving from neighboring bands. Yet thousands of other analyzed ancient humans reveal something far less sensational and infinitely more important. Their parents were not extremely close biological kin. So, did ancient humans reproduce with family members? Yes, cousins sometimes partnered. Isolated populations naturally carried substantial shared ancestry. A few recorded individuals were born from sibling or parent-child unions. Certain royal elites transformed close-kin marriage into high political theater. And coercion, crisis, or limited choices almost certainly produced cases that archaeology will never recover. However, the popular image of prehistoric humans trapped inside a single cave, forced to select whichever sibling looked least annoyed, is completely wrong. Ancient communities were mobile, deeply connected, and socially intelligent. They recognized kinship, regulated relationships, exchanged partners, and maintained networks much larger than their immediate camps. They did not understand modern genetics. They simply understood that some people were family. They understood that long-term partners needed to come from somewhere else. And when another group appeared on the horizon, bringing unfamiliar faces, new tools, different stories, and strange accents, that encounter offered far more than simple trade. It kept humanity's family tree from collapsing into a circle,